Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to r/ProRevenge, where you'll hear stories about people getting what they deserve. My friends, in this episode, you're gonna hear 3 revenge stories. The first story, OP's fiance is a cheater, and he ruins her career. The second story, OP ends his boss's marriage over $40. And we'll finish up with I'm laughing because it's ridiculous. And we'll finish up with a workplace-related revenge on a shady company. My friends, I do hope you enjoy the stories today, and hit that subscribe button for future stories. I don't know why I said it like that. So, my ex-fiance and I were together for a good amount of time. I fell in love with her, put a ring on her finger, and was completely loyal to her for the whole stretch. I'll use Jay for short. So, Jay decided to tell me that she wasn't happy, and she needed a break. She was no longer in love with me. After some digging, I found out that she was screwing around behind my back. When confronted, she deleted everything. Compared to her phone records, there was quite a bit missing. After betraying my trust and lying to me for 8 months straight, I felt it was necessary to even the playing field, considering that she wasn't feeling the same hurt that I was feeling. So this is my revenge. So Jay worked in a car sales industry. During her time there, she would send me surveys to complete if she thought her customers would leave a bad one. It's an industry norm, but never talked about. Negative surveys lead to a lower average, and if the average drops below a certain point, she owes money. If it stays above, she gets money for every positive survey she has. This is against her company's customer privacy policies. We would intentionally leave the house so my IP address wouldn't be attached. On top of the survey fiasco, she was taking certification tests for people at her workplace for cash, and who knows what else. The worst part was, the guy she was screwing around with was a coworker. She originally masked her text with him by saying she was working a deal. My next step here was to write this all up, to send it to the manufacturer, her employer's office, and the trainer for the region. I also included some media sites, made it so they would feel more inclined to take action. The next day, I was contacted by her corporate office and asked to call in to provide more detail. I did, and was assured this matter would be investigated swiftly. I was able to provide emails to corporate, and that's what ultimately sealed the coffin. So, during this ordeal, I wasn't quiet about it. I told Jay what I was doing. She thought the managers had her back and she was untouchable. A day passes, she leaves for work. An hour later, she returns. She was screaming and crying about how she got suspended. The following day, I get a text from Jay saying that she had been fired. So not only did she lose her job, she lost her career. She will never step back into a car sales position for the rest of her life. So, cheating while dating is one thing, and is pretty bad already, but somehow cheating after you've said yes to getting married is so much worse to me, guys. Did she deserve this? I feel like it was only a matter of time before she got caught doing all the shady stuff at work, and was gonna be let go anyway. So, when I was in college, I had a minimum wage job in a bargain retail store. I worked in the warehouse, around a lot of older guys, and the job required heavy lifting. Usually 75 to 250 pounds of pallets and boxes. I started off working in the warehouse, and it motivated me to start lifting weights seriously. I lost 25 or 26 pounds over the course of my first 6 months there by working out solo at the campus gym. However, one of my coworkers was an older guy, 40s to 50s, with whom I had very little in common. I rarely talked to anybody else, but I did want to be seen as one of the cool guys. So, it was strange, but an honor when the manager, and we'll call him Victor, approached me at work one day and started conversing with me. Victor was older, 45 years old I think, but he was well respected by everybody in the warehouse. He dressed well and seemed pretty fit. In the course of the conversation, we discussed lifting weights together, and he invited me over to his home one day as he spent thousands of dollars on it and he had the top of the line equipment. So we exchanged phone numbers and agreed to live together on Friday when his wife, we'll call her Nora, was at work. So I showed up at his house in one of my favorite t-shirts, and Victor was shirtless. He suggested that I lift with no shirt too. I felt uneasy about it and said no, but Victor snatched my shirt by the left sleeve and pulled it until it ripped. He apologized and promised to buy another shirt for me, and I had to lift with no shirt on. Throughout the workout, Victor kept touching my chest and my stomach. As he said, it was to focus. I kept pushing it to the back of my head, but I did decline to go inside Victor's house. I left my ripped shirt at his house in the garage, where his weight set was located. Over the next few days, the awkwardness increased. Victor asked during phone calls if I had a girlfriend, if I was having sex regularly, etc., etc. He ran into me in the break room at work during my lunch break and would always sit close to me, just talk about really personal stuff. I learned that his wife was a pastor at a prominent church, and she made more money than Victor, and that Nora did not believe in sex outside of procreation. When I asked about my shirt being replaced, Victor always said he had money problems, and I ended up replacing the shirt myself later. Victor invited me over again to work out with him, and I wore a tank top that time, and Victor asked me to take it off, which I did, and during the workout he mentioned that he was behind in his electric bill. He asked me to borrow $40 and said that he and his wife were having a rough patch, so he couldn't borrow from her. Like a gullible idiot, I went to the nearest bank, withdrew the money, and put $40 in Victor's hand after the workout. He promised to pay me back at payday. So, payday came and went, but Victor's presence did not. I received late-night phone calls from Victor, and I stopped answering his calls and got voicemails from him, asking me to call him back. When I confronted Victor at work to stop calling me and to just pay me back, he told me he would pay me back the next payday, and that he just really needed a friend to talk to. I felt badly, agreed to wait, but also made up an excuse of how I couldn't lift weights with him anymore. He didn't pay me back the following payday either, but Victor did send me a thread of pictures with his shirt off, in his underwear, and nude, all within the week of payday. When that third payday came, Victor avoided me at work. So I decided to get revenge. Infuriated with not being paid and a slew of pictures that I wasn't interested in, I went to Facebook the day after payday and found Victor's wife's Facebook page and her church's Facebook page. I created a Facebook account with Victor's full name and then created a Facebook page with his first name and last initial, and uploaded all of the photos he had sent me. Then I friended his wife and the church's Facebook pages, set all the settings to friends-only level privacy, and logged out. That same night, I called our company's ethics hotline and left a voicemail tip. Mr. Victor Freeze is drinking very heavily and making lewd comments to coworkers and customers. Please look into this. Within a week, Victor was fired. Not only had he been drinking on the job and sometimes come to work hungover, he had been using corporate gas cards to fuel his and his wife's vehicles. He was arrested during a shift and several employees saw him walked out in handcuffs. Victor called me drunk again from his hotel room after his wife kicked him out of their house. Not satisfied with this level of revenge, I recorded Victor's voicemails into a handheld recorder that I bought for my college classes. I mailed the recording to his wife's church and marked it as "Attention, Nora Freeze. Press play." Then I changed phone numbers. I haven't heard from Victor in years, but his firing was the talk of the store for months. Oh my goodness. OP is stone cold. So the moral of the story is, if you owe somebody $40, pay them back, because if you don't, you might get divorced if you send them nudes. I used to work for a manufacturing company who makes waste containers and dumpsters and such, and at first, it was a good job with a good manager and no problems. I enjoyed the work. It was dirty, physically demanding, but it kept me in shape. I could just put in my earbuds and cruise through the day without any issues. My initial job was to prep the units for painting by polishing the imperfections with a sander and grinding down the areas that were too rough, as well as cleaning them up after the welders were done with them. But after a while, they kept laying off so many people and dumping their jobs on me that eventually towards the end of my time I was there, I was quality control, I helped the painter, was a warehouseman, finisher, grinder, and also a janitor for no additional pay beyond the small cost of living raises we got once in a while. After a year of working for the company without issues, new management showed up, and as they like to do, they start making all kinds of changes just for the sake of making changes. Things that made jobs harder with no benefit. They cut corners that should not have been cut, and generally they hurt productivity and workplace safety. The change in management was bad, but that was not the end of the world. It made things harder for no real reason, but all in all, things were still manageable. Until I ended up off work for about a month, with a collapsed lung, that to this day I still believe was caused by working conditions there and the lack of ventilation and PPE. When I came back to work, I was on light duty for quite some time, since I had surgery to repair the lung and prevent it from collapsing again. I went from the golden boy, who they called on when things had to get done, to the red-headed stepchild of the company, and management was doing everything they could to get me to quit. They would throw my tools away, hide my stool so I couldn't use them while working, hassle me over things like my earbuds, citing safety as why I couldn't use them, even though OSHA themselves told me it was not an issue. The production manager would lie about things and write me up for non-existent violations. Other things include the company giving everybody in the plant raises except for me, catching me 5 minutes before leaving work to go to my weekend and informing me that we had to work the next day, and selectively enforcing safety rules, and even making rules up on the fly. After about 6 months, I had had enough, and decided that if they want to constantly cite policy and safety rules to mess with me, then I could play that game too. I would make this manufacturing plant the safest company on the planet and ensure policy was followed to the exact letter. This was now my big mission. I began to slow my work way down and only do the jobs I was hired and paid to do, instead of doing the workload of 10 employees with nothing in return. They now got exactly one person's work of labor out of me. Customers' orders began stacking up, deliveries were late, bad welds and welds that got missed during production were overlooked, causing the units to have to be repainted when they had to go back to welding lines to be fixed. The warehouse became a wreck, with containers backed up to the point that people did not even have room to work. I went from completing a large unit in 30 minutes to it taking me 2.5 hours on the same one. Other petty things I did included not showing up on Saturday to work when the manager would catch me the last second and tell me I had to. I took to cutting out the text in the employee handbook, citing that working unscheduled hours required management to notify you 3 days in advance, and leaving a letter with that portion of the handbook on his desk the following Monday. There was nothing they could do, since I was following the handbook to the letter. At this point, it was a game of who would blink first. They could lay me off and I could draw unemployment, or I would quit. Next on the list was safety. They liked to hassle me so much about trivial things that I figured they would appreciate me going through the plant and documenting every single last OSHA violation, and safety violation and anything else that was not right. I had a notebook that was filled with violations from one end of the plant to the other. Welders that had frayed cords around puddles of water, tools being left on top of the units that could fall off and hit someone, lack of ventilation, particle counts that were too high, forklifts that were not serviced enough, and I tagged out equipment that technically shouldn't be used in its current state, and locked out the forklifts that needed brakes or any sort of maintenance. Eventually, the production manager took the bait, and untagged one of the forklifts I'd locked out due to having bad brakes. Anybody who knows the lockout procedure can understand what a massive no-no that is. Once I compiled my list of improvements, I went to the government official, who was overseeing safety and procedure, since we often worked on government orders. I gave him my notebook, informed him of my manager taking the lockout off a defective forklift, then went on break and waited. About 30 minutes later, I saw my manager walking back from the head office looking pissed beyond belief. Later I heard from somebody who knows him that he got punished severely, especially for the forklift. From then on, he avoided me and wouldn't even speak to me or look at me. After that, I continued to slow my work pace way down and got a bit of satisfaction each day from the complete dump the place had become and how backed up it was every single day. After I left the company, I heard they hired 5 guys to do my job and they still did a terrible job at it. Had they treated me better, instead of coming at me like they did, they would have still been getting the top quality work from me that they got when I first joined them, and things would have went along just fine. I can't imagine how much money I must have cost the company by sticking to the exact letter of the rules. Guys, so I work in the steel construction business, and I can tell you that there's a lot of welding shops that are exactly like this. From working at shady shops, I can safely assume that they might have been upset at OP that he took work off for the collapsed lung, and might have even filed a workers' comp or something to get paid for the month that he was off. So I say this because I've had experience with a coworker who had a metal pipe fall on his foot and had it broken, and the boss got in huge trouble for that. So when the guy got back and his foot was healed and everything, you could tell that the boss was doing the exact thing that OP's boss was doing, giving him crappy tasks, etc., trying to make the guy quit for essentially costing the company money for being injured. I'm really not quite sure what happens when a worker files for workplace compensation due to something that happened at the workplace. So guys, if you know what goes on behind the scenes and what happens to a company when a worker does file for workers' compensation, I would really love to know. Guys, and that brings us to another end of r/ProRevenge. If you enjoyed these stories today, do hit that subscribe button. If you're not subscribed, and if you missed the last episode of r/ProRevenge, OP's neighbor purposely annoys him for fun and gets absolutely wrecked. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.